This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. You're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. I'm delighted to be joined by Seán Óg De Paor to look ahead to this weekend's Connacht final between Moycullen and St Brigid's. First off, Seán, you've obviously been involved with Ormore Mary at underage level over the last few years. Just as a whole, 2025, it's been a remarkable year when you consider 17's football you've won, 17's hurling and 19's football and 19's hurling, all at the A level as well. It's a remarkable achievement.
Yeah, it's a testament, I suppose, to everybody involved in in the underage in Oranmore, both in football and in hurling. Um, the population here is quite large, and that brings its advantages. But at the same time, you have to be organized, you have to be interested, and there's a lot of people, like I said, in both codes that put a lot of time into, that invest a lot of time into the youth in the parish. And, I suppose the fruit of that investment was certainly borne out this year, where, we did a clean sweep across the boards. And we also won to add to that, we won the under 16 hurling county title as well. And we're I suppose a bit unlucky, maybe not to add the under 16 football to it as well. But I suppose ultimately, it's great, all that underage success, but I think we'd say in both codes, I suppose people won't be happy, I suppose, until you're competing at the senior level. And obviously, the senior hurlers, they were fantastic this year. They got as far as would say the quarter final against Turlough Moor. We're a bit unlucky, I felt. Would say our footballers, we contested well. We played four championship games, and we won two of them. But I suppose it's senior level that you want to be competing at. But look at that Irish phrase "mull an oige agus tucashi." There's a lot of ag mull an oige going on in Oranmore, and I suppose and in Mary with the new facilities up in Renville, it's onwards and upwards.
Uh, Just with that, Sean, because some people might think large numbers straight away, but I nearly think for these clubs that have the bigger numbers, there's some huge challenges there with that.
Yeah, I suppose you have to be organized. Yeah, you have to be organized, and I suppose with underage as well, the lads have to enjoy it. They have to look forward to coming to training as well, and there is obviously a serious element to it, but um, I think that's one of the main things, I suppose, to be organized. But I think as well with big numbers, and especially I suppose where we're located, we're a suburb of Galway City. It's only 7 or 8 miles into the city. I suppose the thing that you want to foster in the young kids is a sense of belonging, a sense of representing their parish, because you look at the big clubs in Galway, and there's a huge sense of identity as to this is where I'm from and this is the jersey I'm representing, and I am so proud to be from where I'm from. So you have to try and foster and culture that as well. But look at it's I suppose it's exciting times in Oranmore Mary at the moment, but there's a lot, that old Fianna Fáil slogan, a lot, what is it? A lot done, but a lot to do.
Yeah.
That type of thing. But it's great to be involved in some small shape.
What have you done then? Do you feel to get the most out of your underage teams? Because even looking at the football this year, it's back-to-back Connacht titles at under 17 level as well, which is a remarkable achievement.
Yeah, well, I suppose the first thing is the lads are talented. On both courts they are talented, but they are, they know the value of hard work, and I think, um, okay, you have your collective training sessions, but anytime you go down to any of the pitches, be they in Mary or in Oranmore, there's always young lads out on the pitch, be it practicing their football or their hurling. So, it's not a case of just, I suppose, turning up and you win matches. There's a lot of work that goes in, both collectively and I suppose individually. And you know, there's a lot of houses and households in Ormore that are, they're GA houses, be that hurling and football, and it's important. It's an important thing in their house, and that feeds through, with the young lads. And I suppose winning the minor Connacht title last year for the first time, and there were, I suppose, a significant number. There was 6, 7 fellas that were involved last year, either on the team or on the panel, that were also involved young enough again this year. So that experience kind of helped them, I think, this year. But look at it's brilliant. I think I'm not sure now about my history here, but I think the last club maybe to win one or two in a row would have been Salt Hill,
Yeah.
and a lot of the guys that played, in those minor Connacht winning teams, have gone on to play and are currently playing for the Salt Hill senior football team, and that's the challenge for us now to to get to that level, but it certainly is a challenge.
Do you think now the natural progression maybe is, I know you've quite a lot of players with the Galway 20s this year, but is, I suppose, the natural progression now for the club to get more and more of these players on Galway football teams?
Yeah, I suppose that's part of it. You know, I suppose we can see it in the hurling side of the house here. We'd say you had Garage McInerney and Niall Burke for years there, All Ireland winning hurlers, and superb role models for the young lads. We haven't had, we'd say, a senior intercounty footballer for quite a while. So it's probably, you know part of it, in terms of, maybe it would be great at some point, but um because you'd have a role model for some of the younger lads, growing up.
Yeah.
um but look at, I suppose Rome wasn't built in a day. So we've had a fair smattering of minor county footballers and hurlers, and we'll say, I suppose under 20 as well. Um, but it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah, you've probably seen this year, there's probably a bit to go just with the year. I suppose your intermediates had ended up in the relegation semi-final, and a lot of people would have predicted them, I suppose, to maybe go far in the knockouts this year. But that could be, I suppose, a good learning curve for a couple of the younger players now, I suppose, applying their trade at intermediate level.
Yeah, well, I suppose, look at, you know, it, I think our intermediate squad this year was a very, very young squad. For whatever reason, there 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 seems to be a dearth of kind of, players around the 27, 28 years of age that bring stability and experience to any group. Like that kind of age profile, we don't have a huge amount of that age profile. But look at the you are right. There were probably a couple of high pressure games in the intermediate championship this year, and that will stand to some of the younger lads in terms of a layer of experience for again.
You just mentioned there, Sean, about the new facilities out in Renville. Obviously, some people haven't seen them yet, but quite impressive by all accounts.
Yeah, I was up there last weekend. I'd seen loads of pictures, and obviously I passed by it a lot, but I hadn't actually gone in to look at it until last Saturday. And I have to say, it's just really, really superb. And the development committee. I won't start naming names now because I'll leave somebody out. But the development committee that was, you know, they've been superb. I don't know how they've done it, but they have produced a real top class facility up there in Renville. At the moment, there's a full size 4G GA pitch, just exactly like what you'd have in Beacon. It's floodlit. From what I understand, it will be in use, as in there's a booking system there that you can book your slot there. Obviously, the club will be using that, as next year goes on. But that's there, and then you have two full size pitches that are, um, there's grass growing on them already, and they'll be ready for use in 12 months' time. And then a further 12 months on, there'll be another two pitches there as well. And ultimately, I think two of them possibly might be, well as the Astro, I think there's another one that may be floodlit as well. So it's just, look, it's a testament to all those people. There's about, I think, 6 or 7 people that, have driven that for the last 6, 7 years and or even longer. I mean, the amount of money they had to raise and all of that, like they've been just superb. So it is, it's something that was badly needed because the population here is exploding, and you know, it's just to a certain extent it was fish and loaves. The facilities that we had prior to Renville were fantastic, but there just wasn't enough space for everybody all of the time. So this should alleviate some of that and let everybody get on with it. I think sometimes people maybe don't understand, like, but Ormore Mary are a one club, which which means you have the four codes. You have the Gaelic football, you have the hurling, you have the camogie, and you have the ladies football. And we're all equal. And with Renville now, starting and kicking off, um, every code will have its slots and that type. So it's really like I've known yourself. I've seen lots of club facilities and county facilities all over the country, and this is, it's up there with them really.
I suppose turning matters towards the Connacht final this weekend. You obviously have an Ormore Mary man involved with Bridget's and goals this weekend, Conor Carroll. Obviously, he made the decision to, I suppose, leave Ormore Mary and go to Bridget's, but no doubt there'll still be a lot of people in the club keeping an eye on it this weekend.
Yeah, he's where I'm sitting now here talking to you. His home house is about a half a mile up the road there, and you'd see him the odd time, in the village, and that he's working, as far as I'm aware, up in Roscommon. His two brothers are involved in the club here. Paul played on the junior team that was in the county final, and Brian was our keeper. His younger brother, the youngest guy, he was the our keeper on the intermediate team this year. So yeah, look, there'll be a lot of eyes on him. Um, locally here, not alone in Oranmore, but I would say in Galway as well. It's on TV on Sunday. I think the throw-in is at 1 o'clock. So certainly Bridget's got a good signing this year. So they did when they signed Conor Carroll. Um,
He's really turned into a fantastic keeper, though, hasn't he, over the last few years? Even, I suppose he wasn't getting his chance with Galway, and he went over to Roscommon, and he's really impressed since he's made the move even there.
Yeah, I think if I have my history right, I think he would have been on a Galway under 20 panel
Yeah,
when Pádraig Joyce was the Galway under 20 manager. But in his final year as an under 20, I think he made the decision to transfer to Roscommon. Now, it's not like obviously he wouldn't have. I'm not, I doubt he wouldn't have made that decision lightly, but it probably helped the fact that both his parents are from Roscommon and are very passionate Roscommon football supporters, Etna and Brendan, and his uncle is fairly high up in the GA as well. He would have been a former, well, I think former chairman of the Roscommon County Board, Brian as well. But Connor transferred to Roscommon in his final year as an under 20, which was, my guess is 4 or 5 years ago, and they got to the All Ireland final. I think it was I think it was Offaly that bet them in Croke
yeah,
Park.
would have been,
So that
yeah,
was
yeah.
that was a an exciting journey, I suppose, for him. And he threw in his lot then with the Roscommon seniors. But certainly, you're right. He has developed superbly as a keeper in the last in the last few years. Um, it was interesting actually this year with the new rule changes and how it affected, it did affect goalies a fair bit. It affected all players, but just in terms of, they can't take a back pass anymore. Kickouts have to go beyond the arc and that. But he hasn't missed a beat at all. But I think his greatest attribute, if I was to it would be his temperament. He just doesn't seem unfazed by anything, and that's a great thing to have as a keeper. And you know, like he certainly is one of the top keepers in the country. I think it was the replay against Pádraig Pearses in the Roscommon County final. He got man of the match. Um, and I was watching the highlights on TG Cahir on Monday night, and you could see why. I mean, there was a couple of saves that he made that were fairly outrageous, but um, there'll there'll be people keeping an eye out on Sunday, certainly for Conor Carroll. And by the way, he'll have to be on his game on Sunday now, because Moycullen in that middle third are fairly. No, I know Bridget's are fairly good in midfield as well, but Moycullen have some big men out there, the likes of Jared Davern, so he'll have to direct his kickouts, and I'm sure he'll have a plan, um, but he'll have to direct his kickouts in such a way as to try and maximize, you know, the Bridget's uh, kickouts, as in that they get a lot of them.
Yeah, and obviously Anthony Cunningham as well makes things interesting as well with him in charge of Bridges.
Yeah, like I don't think he gets enough credit for, because it's very unusual that you would have, and he is obviously a top class manager of the Galway senior hurling team. They're unfortunate not to win an All Ireland under him, and yet he turns his hand then to Gaelic football. I think originally he was in charge of Gary Castle,
Yeah.
and they would have done fairly well under him, but then to take St. Bridget's and to he's just, he looks very comfortable in the role. But I suppose a lot of what you bring as a manager to a hurling team also, it's the same for Gaelic football, because okay, you have your tactical and your technical side and your physical side, but a lot of it is mindset and preparing teams and you know getting fellas ready for the battle. And he's and he's very good. And he has a long tradition with Bridges as well. I mean, he was there as far back as 2006, I think.
Yeah.
So he knows the club, he knows what makes them tick. And as it's funny, I think the only other manager that I can think of that might cross the codes, if you like. And again, it's in Roscommon. I think the Pádraig Pearse's manager, Joe Canning's brother. Am I right?
Frank Canning, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, there must be something in the air down there, but no, he's
yeah.
doing a great job.
Just looking for my Cullen this weekend. They're obviously going to come up against a massive test. But for my Cullen to beat Brigid's in a Connacht final in Roscommon, this would really, I suppose, considering all the work that's went on in my Cullen the last few years, like 22 obviously they won a Connacht title, 23 and 24 beaten in county finals, but to come now in 25 and beat Brigid's, it would really, I suppose, cement them as a really impressive club team when it comes to Connacht Championship.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I was thinking about this today, and you go back, the last 20 years in Galway in terms of senior football champions. Now, obviously, top of the pile, Corofin. I mean, they would be in the conversation as who was the best Gaelic, the best senior Gaelic club team ever, right? So they're definitely number one. But, Mike Cullen, the win that they had against Salthill in the county final this year, the way they won the game, the way they played, the way they battled, I mean, it cemented their legacy as far as I'm concerned, anyways, in Galway. Three county titles, and competed in other county finals as well. Like you said, they have one Connacht club title under the belt, but certainly this this game against St. Brigid's on Sunday is a massive test for them. And you are right. If they were to pull this off, I would say that it would rank as probably their best win ever. I know, your maiden Connacht title is always special, but St. Brigid's are one of the heavyweights of club football. They've won their All Ireland club title in 2013. They were unlucky 2 years ago. They should have probably closed the game out against Glen, but this is a massive challenge for Mike Cullen, and if they were to pull this off, it would be their best achievement, I would think. And I suppose the thing that Mike Cullen thrive in, or the conditions, if you like, in which they thrive in, is when they enter a game as underdogs, and they are underdogs for Sunday.
Myself and your former teammate Seán O'Donnell last week, we were referencing the point that we both felt in order for Mike Cullen to win this weekend that a certain Peter Cook would need to be on the pitch.
I would agree. I would agree 100%. My sources, and we all have sources, Paul, but my sources tell me that he will most definitely be available this Sunday. And he has trained, by all accounts, collectively with Mike Cullen this past 2 weeks. So that's a bonus for them. However, as good a player as Peter Cook is, and I'm a huge admirer of his. I still think I don't think you can get away with 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 what he is doing, in the sense of, I mean, he has his job, his work, it brings him away and all that. And he obviously keeps himself in tip-top condition, right? But I don't know, you can get away with it obviously in the Galway Club Championship, right? Because he came on against Salthill and he got his two-pointers. Without him, they wouldn't have won. But I don't know if you can continue um, to take that approach in the thinner atmosphere, if you like, of a Connacht Club final away in Hyde Park um, to St. Brigid's.
What do you do,
I
Sean?
don't know if you can get away with it.
What do you do there? Do you start from obviously like the last two games in particular? There's no point in saying otherwise. Mike Cullen have came through them both relatively easy. Obviously, the last test came in the county final. Do you do something similar in the county final if you're maybe struggling after the first quarter? You throw them in, or do you throw them in from the start?
I wouldn't throw him in from the start at all. I think the talk before the Salthill match was they had to start him, right? But and I don't think people were too happy, locals in Moycullen when they saw that he wasn't starting against Salthill. But as it turned out, Cathal Clancy got it spot on. They brought him in after 15, 20 minutes, and the effect that he had on the game was match winning. I would suggest that against St Brigid's they don't start him. You can't start him because he hasn't played any of the last two games against either the Leitrim or Sligo champions. I would sit him on the bench and now obviously the St. Brigid's midfield are very, very strong. You'll certainly see him after, if they have any chance of winning, he has to play a lot of the game. So, you will see him come on fairly early in the game, but I wouldn't start him.
Yeah. I was just thinking during the week, obviously the British forwards get a lot of the headlines, and had me sort of thinking, are Moycullen nearly going to have to reshuffle things at the back? Because obviously the man you're looking at inside is Ben O'Carroll, and he's the one that's going to take watching. Will Moycullen have to maybe reshuffle things and put someone like Sean Kelly back on him?
I don't think so. I think Sean Kelly in the half back line. If you're moving him back, I just feel that he's in a vein of form now in the half back line there. There's a nice balance to it. You've David Wynn and you've O'Connor there who's turning out to be a fantastic player. I think as dangerous as Ben O'Carroll is, I wouldn't move Sean Kelly back on him, because you'll lose too much. I think from his go forward. Um, you know his attacks forward. The way I'd see it is that possibly Owen Kelly might take Ben O'Carroll and see how he gets on with him. Now, obviously, it's not just Ben O'Carroll that's in there. I think it's Bobby Nugent.
Bobby
Uh,
Nugent, maybe Mike Mahan picks him up.
yeah, I think that's the matchup there. And then Aidan Claffey, um, he'll take the next person. But
Sending
I
Kilbride
think.
probably.
Yeah, that's an interesting one now that selling Kilbride. I mean, who would have thought that I think he's 40 years of age, that he would
Yeah.
be number one in the shape that he's in to play in a Connacht Senior Club final. I mean, it's a testament to him. But then I suppose even when Senan Kilbride was at his peak as a footballer, and some footballers are like wine. They age very, very well, and it's particularly, I think, those footballers that don't rely on their pace for their effectiveness. They rely more on their skill and their awareness of position and that. And he definitely, fits that category. But yeah, probably Aidan Claffey would take up Senan Kilbride, but certainly like Ben O'Carroll, he's one of I just love watching him. I just think he's just constant danger, just bouncing around the place and brave, and he reminds me a bit of Derek Savage. When Derek was at his peak for Galway, just you just could not take your eyes off him, and he needed watching. So, um, it'll be interesting that, but I think Owen Kelly is the man for him at the start and see how he goes.
Yeah. I think Owen Kelly's having a great season, isn't he?
He is, yeah. No, I think he's actually playing with a bit of maybe an injury to his ankle, but
Yeah.
Owen Kelly, just a tough man. He's a he's a
Yeah.
he's a big man. I had Owen Kelly in class for 2 years in St Mary's College, right? And I was looking after the senior football team, and Sean was in there as well at the same time. And I'd say I asked Owen about 10 times, would he come out and play Gaelic football for the senior football team in St Mary's? And every time it was no, right? He was a big, big basketballer, and went off to America on a basketball scholarship, but I always knew that, you know, I always knew that he'd make a superb footballer, and he has. And he is having, like, he's very understated, but he's very, very effective. You know,
Yeah.
he'll do a job, and he's the ultimate team player as well. You know, he strikes me as the type of guy. He doesn't care who gets the plaudits at the end of a game, you know, as
Yeah.
long as Moycullen win.
I even think back to the county final. For the form Rob was in, it was obviously very hard for him to deal with him. But I think at one stage later on, he got a turnover out on the sideline from Rob Finnerty, and you could see what it even meant to him that day.
Yeah, and like that's the sign of a person, you know, and not every player has this, you know, just mentally very, very strong. If you're marking a top forward, like they are going to get a score or two, they are going to win a certain percentage of ball out in front of you. But the thing is, you keep going, right? You don't let your, you know, you stay positive. You don't let your guard down, and you keep going. And you know, he has that mentality, but that mentality, you know, runs throughout the Mike Cullen team. I mean, look, his brother Sean. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, apart from being, you know, a superb physical specimen, and he can get around the place, you know, fairly quickly. He can shift, but it's just his mentality. You know, David Wynn as well. He's hard as nails, claffy. You know that. You know, I think that's Mike Cullen's one of their biggest attributes, that they're they're mentally very strong. They've huge resolve.
Yeah. The midfield is going to be a war zone. Obviously, you have Shane Canaan and Eddie Nolan there. Mike Cullen are you nearly going to play with a three across the middle like they usually do with Tom Clark, Jared Daverin, and Paul Kelly. It's going to be a massive contest there, isn't it?
It will. Now, I might have my figures wrong, but they reckon that up to nearly 80% of kickouts now are contested kickouts. So, like we'd say the Mike Cullen goalie, um, a lot of his kickouts are directed to Ger Davern. And why wouldn't you? I mean, Ger Davern is what, 6'5", and he's got a great pair of hands on him. And, you know, that's where most of the Mike Cullen kickouts will be directed towards. And obviously, you know, the breaking ball is huge now. So that's a contest within itself. But it's great to see. It's great to see that back in the game where, you know, if it's not a clean catch, like it's you know, you have to get down and dirty and win the ball. So yeah, no, I expect, as you say, a war zone out there the next day. You know, but Mike Cullen won't have met as good. Obviously, John Maher missed the county final, but they won't have met probably as good a midfield as what they're going to meet on Sunday. Plus, I mentioned the breaks there. I mean, your Bridget's half back line.
Yeah.
You know, Paul McGrath will pop up there, as will probably Rory Fallon. These guys, you know,
Brian
they're
Stack.
Brian Stack. They're all look at they're excellent players. So um you know, it'll certainly go some ways towards deciding the outcome of the game as to who wins that midfield battle.
It does feel if Mike Cullen can sort of stop that ball from the half back line for Bridges, it could be huge at the weekend.
Yeah, yes, you're right. Now, I read, would say in the county final, or not the county final, but the match against Ballina in Hyde Park, where they gave them a fair old trouncing. Out of the out of whatever they scored, most of what they scored, I think 95% of it was from play. And on top of that, 11 of their 15 scored from play. So I suppose compared to Moy Cullen, whereby a lot of their scores come via Desi Keneally, the
Yeah.
spread of scorers on the Bridget's uh, on the Bridges team, you know, if you stop one player, somebody else is going to score. But just to go back to what you're saying there, yeah, they'll try, and you know, I suppose that's what a lot of teams do. They try and negate the supply of ball going in. Because certainly, if Ben O'Carroll and Bobby Nugent, if they get a decent supply of ball, they will do damage. Um, and as you know, I think the fact that it's on in Hyde Park as well, the surface in Hyde Park is a top class surface. And it's I think St Bridget's have played their last three championship games in Hyde Park. So therefore, they will be very, very familiar with that pitch. So, I suppose it all lends itself to, a lot of the advantages being in St. Bridget's Corner Sunday.
Obviously, Desi has got a huge proportion of my Cullen scores. Fionn and Fiacre McDonagh chipped in, I suppose, with some big scores the last day against Leitrim and Gales. And Niall Walsh probably maybe hasn't got, I suppose, some of the scores he's racking up throughout the county championship. And Johnny Maloney's always been good for 1 or 2 points. But when you look at those 3 or 4 players in attack, there will have to be, as you mentioned there, a spread of scores for my Cullen the next day.
Yeah, I think like Desi's been brilliant. He'll probably win senior club player of the year in Galway this year. But it is a disadvantage in a way that they're so reliant on him. Now he has produced every single time up to now, but if you're the St. Bridget's manager, if you're Anthony Cunningham, it's an easy thing to say. Now I know it's a lot more difficult to implement it, but if you stop Desi Keneally, you're halfway there. In fact, you're three-quarters way there to beating Moycullen. The two McDonagh brothers, Fionn and Fiacre, you know, I know they would have primarily probably played hurling for Cumann Amánach, the Moycullen, but they're lovely players. The only and I think it was Fionn scored a couple of goals the last day in the semi-final, but I wouldn't really count that because they were always going to win that game the last day, and I know that sounds flippant and it's not disrespectful or anything, but you know uh, I am not sure. I think he's what is he? Fionn is he about 6'2", 6'3"? Like he's a big man, and like he could have he if Desi is stopped or nullified, well then he'll have to step up to the plate because there's I can't see really anybody else.
You would like to see Mike Cullen just throw 1 or 2 balls into Fionn more, particularly as you mentioned there with the size of him, because as well, like it's not something Bridges maybe will expect either, because I know as you mentioned the last day he got in with scores, but maybe he hasn't got enough direct ball throughout the championship for Mike Cullen on the edge of the square.
Yeah, and you're right because I've watched Mike Cullen a fair bit, and you are right. It doesn't seem to be something that they have tried too often. Invariably, it's a kind of a little punt pass into space or a hand pass generally uh, towards maybe Desi. But it's not something that you could hang your hat on. I mean, you could put him in there and hit maybe 1 or 2 balls per half into him just to see what the reaction is. Um, but like there have been, I suppose, calls for Fionn to possibly be, and who knows, Pádraig Joyce might have a look at him at some point. I mean, you know, the big full forward, it hasn't gone away. Especially with the new rules been brought back in, but certainly, you know, he can be explosive, that's for sure. But I think if Mike Cullen are to win the next day, that himself and Daisy will probably have to, we'll say, produce the goods.
We mentioned earlier on that for Mike Cullen to win at the weekend, it would be one of their greatest achievements. But you will feel as well they'll have to produce the best performance they've ever produced as well.
Yeah, I think it boils down, if you distill it down to three things, right? I think for Mike Cullen to win, Desi Keneally is going to have another one of his, shooting the lights out matches. So that's number one. Number two, then Sean Kelly. Like I think Sean Kelly had the game of his life against Salthill in the county final. He was just exceptional. He was outstanding. It was the best I've seen him play since before since the match where he injured his ankle against Armagh in the qualifiers there about 2 3 years ago. Right, he was superb. And then the third thing that has to happen is Peter Cook, um, the Peter Cook influence. Now, if we go back to the Desi uh, situation, right? If Anthony Cunningham is doing his homework, and I've no doubt he is, he'll have a plan up his sleeve for Desi Keneally, and he certainly has the personnel in his defence. For example, Brian Stack to certainly try and negate Desi Keneally. Sean Kelly, you know, it's I suppose it's up to himself really, because if he's on song, he's basically impossible to stop, right? Peter Cook, like I said earlier, I don't know if you can get away with it again. No, it's not that I don't want that sounds bad. Like Peter Cook is a fantastic talent. He's such a physical specimen. But when I say get away with it, I mean that you're not training with the team collectively, all summer, and whilst he did produce the goods in the county final, I just don't believe that you can do it at a higher level if you have spent most of the last whatever couple of months you know working elsewhere, not spending time with the team. So they're the three main reasons I think why Moycullen are in a Connacht final, and they're the three players I think that have to produce the goods if Moycullen are to have what I would think is probably their greatest victory of all this Sunday.
Yeah, it would be some achievement for them to get over the line. They play Bridget's in Dr. Hyde Park, 1 o'clock, game live on TG Car as well. Sean, are you still enjoying as much as ever? I suppose the various club games with TG Car.
Yeah, I'm actually, well, I wouldn't call it work now, but I'm down there on Sunday. I really enjoy it. The lads, if you like, behind the cameras that work for Nemeton, who do the matches for TG Car, they are very um they're lovely people to work with, and also the people in front of camera, the guys like Micheál O'Donnell, they're genuinely interested in Gaelic games, and they love watching the matches and being part of it as well. So look at you know there's there's loads of I suppose analysts out there that that are employed, if you like, by TG Carr, and I'm just lucky, I suppose, to be to be one of them. But yeah, looking forward, like I would look forward to every game, but I think especially this Sunday because it's a real heavyweight feel about it. This Sunday, you've two fantastic teams, and like whoever comes through Sunday, I would suggest that you know you cannot write them off in terms of the Andy Merrigan, really.
Yeah, it would be obviously the Ulster champions, so Kilcoo obviously awaiting Scottstown, and Newbridge obviously play in the game that was postponed in the semi-final. But fair test coming too from the Ulster champions after this for whoever wins on Sunday.
Well, that's it, yeah. But you like you just don't know how a season pans out. But certainly, whoever wins the next day will have a bit of momentum. And I know whoever wins will have, Christmas will be in the way, if you like. It's a hard one to navigate, really, that one. But because they'll have to play early, at some point early January. So, but certainly, it's a really it's a game to look forward to. And like Bridget's don't do. inferiority complexes. I remember going down 2 years ago to watch their game against Corofin, and I was fully convinced
Yeah.
that Corofin were going to beat them in Hyde Park, and they just kind of, well, I won't say they blew them away, but they took care of business, St. Brigid's. They just have an innate confidence, I suppose, and a tradition and a culture as a club, I suppose, which has come from, the fact that they have competed in All Ireland finals and won.
Yeah. Just as well today, there's a win for St Jarlath's in the Connacht Post Primaries Championship. I was trying to find a Claregoy result there, but um, it's not something I can find at the minute. Unfortunately, Sean, just with this when it comes to Connacht Post Primary, we've seen there's a combined Leitrim school, there's a combined Sligo school, and I was just thinking to myself the last day, is it maybe something that you feel could work for maybe Galway combined schools? Maybe in the city, if you look at it, for instance, obviously, as Mary's in the past would have been at this level, the Bish have been at this level. Is it something that maybe should be worth examining?
Possibly, yeah. I suppose, what would be the advantages of it? You'd get more players playing at a higher level. Now that said, the people that would give a counter argument, uh, the Bish Junior A footballers are in a Connacht final. They're playing, I think, Monday week, so that would be
Hmm.
an argument against it. The Bish are well able to compete on their own, but interestingly, and it would be, I think, amiss if they didn't kind of do a review on this, but there is an amalgamated Coláiste de Connemara
Okay,
taking part in the Senior B Championship.
okay.
Now, from my understanding, it's all the schools in Connemara, bar, I think, possibly, I think Clifton Community School and Scoil Chumseach Kieran in Carrow. But I think all the other secondary schools in Connemara are amalgamated, and I think from what I understand, it's Donal O'Farta that is their manager. He's a school teacher in Coláiste Cholamkille in Inzervan there. So it would be interesting to see what his thoughts are after their participation in the championship this year, the Senior B Championship. But certainly, if it would help to progress, some players,
Yeah.
you'd be
I'm
all
I'm
for
only
it.
just thinking of the schools in the city, I suppose, to even push them on a bit too.
Yeah, I mean, okay, you'd probably have to discount, like I said, the
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 Bish. So
bit,
you'd
yeah.
have the Jazz, you'd have Coláiste na Credibe, you'd have Coláiste Muidemoher. So that'd be three. Uh, and is there any other secondary school
Merlin
in
College out there.
where?
Merlin College, would that be one?
Merlin College, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I suppose, like, because I suppose each of those four schools on their own, they wouldn't be able to compete at A level.
yeah,
So, it certainly would be an experiment to look at, but the logistics of it, then that's another thing.
yeah,
And you see, on top of that, if you went with a Galway schools college team, do the individual schools still take part in their respective competitions as well? So, you'd have to think about that as well. But in theory, it would sound good.
yeah. Because even obviously, I know Leitrim combined schools bet Claregoy in the first round last week, and they went very close last year. And it seems to have worked well down there. But it definitely does feel like a way forward. I know they're doing a lot now in Leinster schools hurling as well. That there's a lot of
Yeah,
combined
no,
schools
it
there.
does make sense, but the I suppose when you think about schools football in general, and schools football is a brilliant way to develop players 100%. It keeps them active from, whatever, October all the way to March, April the following year. But now I know I'm a dinosaur, but when I was of a secondary school going age, it was generally, and this was the case all over the country, it was mostly schools that developed players. Whereas in the intervening years, it's more clubs now that take an active role in developing young players, probably more so than schools. So, while schools are still very, very important in terms of developing players, maybe not to the same extent as 20, 30 years ago, because clubs have taken up the slack, and we'd say the academies that counties run as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But Jarlath's obviously still in with his chance, and as I said, for people didn't have to declare Galway results, but will post those results to our social media channels over the next few days. Just an announcement as well. Annadown, GA, LGFA, and Camogie clubs are delighted to be hosting a senior football challenge match between Galway and Clare next Thursday at 8 p.m. In Annadown GA grounds to celebrate the official opening of their upgraded facilities. The game will take place on the floodlit pitch, and they'll be organising a shuttle bus every 10 minutes from at 6:45 departing from the church in Cairndolla for that. So it's the Galway and Clare senior footballers in a challenge match there. So that's Thursday, December 4th, as I mentioned. Um, Not too long, Sean, obviously away from the intercounty season. They were officially allowed back training last week. It's obviously, I know the development team have been playing challenges over the last few weeks, but busy time of year for, I suppose, Port Joyce and his management team to, I suppose, start looking at some of, I suppose, new talent to bring through this year.
Yeah, that's true. That said, I think the team, as in the Galway senior football team, I don't think if everybody's fit that was fit last year, I don't I don't think well, I don't know about Paul Conroy,
Mm.
whether there's been no announcement from him in terms of is he going to continue or not. I'd love to see him continue. I mean, he was the player of the year last year, and he still has a huge amount to offer. But obviously, sometimes life takes over, so he has that decision to make. But um, you know, I I'm not so sure that that's the biggest thing on Porrick's in tray in terms of the Galway senior football team. I think the nucleus of the team, is still there. But again, and I know we're going over old ground here, but I still, if Shane Walsh and Damien Comer are 100% fit and consistently 100% fit, well, then that changes the whole thing. Um, I think we have enough of if you like, a supporting cast, but it all depends on whether those two lads are fully fit. If they're fully fit and last a season, well, then I think that particular group of players, they could still pull it off, as in the big prize, right? Um, I was at the Meath Mat last year. It was disappointing, but I think ultimately when we saw the All Ireland final and the level that Kerry got to, I don't think with all the kind of the injuries that we had last year, that I'm not sure we'd have got to that level. But I think there's one last roll of the dice, I think, with that particular group of players. I know that, the way you hear whatever through the grapevine, or that, we'll say some of the squad players that may not have got much game time. I think a few of those lads might have been let go, and that these challenge games that you spoke about, I think they played in Milltown, a Mayo
Yeah.
selection there a couple of weeks ago. That you know that those five or six players that were let go will be will be replaced. In terms of anybody new breaking onto the team, off the top of my head, I suppose, where do you go looking for? You look at maybe your under 20s, right? So I suppose I think Shane McGlinchey had a decent club
Mm.
championship. Physically, certainly he's ready, for for that.
you just sort of hope that he can, I suppose, put injuries to one side now because it probably wasn't until I suppose the latter stages of the championship that he was able to play, I suppose, and put those injuries behind him throughout the club championship.
Yeah, like I suppose for a young lad, he has his injury profile, I suppose, isn't great, but it certainly will be interesting to see how he develops. Also, I think we'd say Colin Costello from Dunmore. I mean, he's obviously a very talented player. He didn't get much game time last year. I think he came on against. I think he got came on possibly against Mayo. I think in the league or something like that
Yeah, he would have
earlier
played a
on.
few minutes, yeah, in the
10,
league, yeah.
15 minutes. So we see how he develops. Also, I think Montpellier, Moylock here on Mulhern. He's probably a bit too young for him. Like, but I can't really see anybody breaking onto the team.
Yeah.
Like for example, like Matthew Thompson did. I mean,
That
what a season!
I was just about to say Matthew Thompson now going on his Erasmus, it's believed, after Christmas to America, which is
Yeah, but Pádraig will sort that out. Matthew Thompson will be playing championship. He doesn't know it yet, but he will be available for the championship. And look at you like obviously Erasmus very very important. And um, but there's no way a player of that caliber. You know, I know he has to do his Erasmus, but I guarantee you he'll be playing by the time championship comes.
yeah.
Um,
If Seán
but
O'Connor keeps his form, because like
yeah,
he had a
yeah.
really good year with the 20s last year as well.
Yeah, I really like Sean O'Connor as a player. He's dynamic, he's pacey, he's strong. I suppose like everybody has stuff to work on. I suppose his end product when he does get into those positions up the pitch, could be better. Uh, but everybody has something to work on. But certainly his potential is good as well. So yeah, actually you're right. He's a guy that has really benefited from Moycullen's run for sure. Um, and there's actually talk of like I mentioned it earlier, Fionn McDonough
Yeah.
possibly, Pádraig having a look at him, and he certainly would be something different. I mean, he or Robert Finnerty could possibly flourish, as in if this big guy was beside him, So it's yeah, but I still think that the if everybody that's there now is fit and they get a right run at it, there's still another roll of the dice in that team, but you still need the two lads. You really like because you go back, you look at the Kerry team that won this year. It's now I know nobody touches David Clifford, but you have David Clifford and you have Paddy and I suppose Shawnee O'Shea up front. You go back, any year over the last 10 years, it's always forwards that win the game ultimately. So um that's why we need the two lads, but I think I just like I really hope, especially Damien Comer, I wish him well. Like he's just plagued. Um, he's plagued with injuries, and it's just I'm sure he's very frustrated himself that he can't get a proper run at things, and I'm sure he's sick of people talking about it, and he's probably sick of people asking him as well, because that's what people do when you're in the public eye. But it'd be great for Galway supporters because he's a very exciting player as well. He's a player that kind of gets people off their seats. So look at that. I think that's Porrick's the biggest thing on his in trade. Get everybody fit.
Yeah, I was looking at the FPD fixtures and the way they're fixed this year to play Leitrim and London first. I imagine they're going to do what they've done similar years, and the development squad will go out for that because obviously there's Mayo to come, first game in the league at the end of January, and funnily enough, I was seeing today that their opponents Mayo are off on a warm weather training camp this weekend.
Yeah, I think certainly Mayo will get a bounce from Andy Moran. Um, they're very happy with him down there. He's obviously very popular with, with the Mayo supporters. But whenever a new manager is appointed, everything is all rosy in the garden
Hmm.
until the matches start, and then it's all about results. But I certainly think we say he's brought back three players. He's brought back Killian O'Connor. I think that's a good move. Probably not 70 minutes, but he's the top scorer in championship history. I mean, that's a no-brainer to bring him back. Rob Henley, you know, I didn't. I thought Colin Reap was fine. I don't know. Maybe he's there as backup or whatever.
He's gone for the year. He's gone traveling. Colin Reap.
Colin Reap. Okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you've done your homework there, Paul. I didn't
yeah,
know that. So hence that makes sense now.
yeah.
And then would say Carr, very the scorer of superb goals. And but again, I think he's a bit injury prone. So, but
Yeah.
like obviously Andy Moore knows what he's about. I think the no, he'd have been too young to, I think, affect things this or next year for Mayo. But I think Kieran MacDonald's young lad Kobe going to Australia. I mean, I think he is. I saw him in the flesh there for Crossmalina, and I know it's a club game in a quarter final against. It was on up in Crossmalina about 2 months ago, but he, he
Against
he was
Belmullet,
superb.
wasn't it? Yeah,
It was Belmullet, yeah. He was
yeah,
superb. He really
yeah.
was superb. I was just like his potential as good as Kieran MacDonald was, but I think the young lads can be better than him based on, well, you can't base it on just 60 minutes, but just everything about him, just his skills, his awareness, and he's a different type of player, but he'll be a loss to Mayo in the sense of him going to Australia. But there'll be a big crowd in Pearse Stadium on I think it's Sunday at 1:30, the 25th of
Yeah,
January.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, the league matches are, they're very exciting. It's a great competition. So it is.
yeah. Just around the corner now. Really, but that's all we do have time for on today's show. Thanks to Seán Óg for coming on to this week's podcast.
Thanks, Paul.